Hello friends, welcome to another video. I'm so excited to have you here with me. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make part 2 of this broomstick skill. In the first part we covered how to deactivation and deactivation of the skill and also just some slight moving. In this video we're going to go more in depth into the mechanics, adding stuff like W to move, and when you let go of the W key you stop moving, sprinting, and moving, leaning. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now before we continue, a little disclaimer here is for the local script we're going to be using a lot of context action service, and I don't know about you, but context action service was very new to me. Before I made the skill I had never used it before, so I advise you go brush up on it, maybe learn and deepen your understanding just a little bit, because we're going to be using it tons in this video and just helps for you to understand. So let's hop into the local script. Now first thing I'm going to do is just for the local script I'm going to move this activated all the way up here. Why do I do that? Well, just for the functions that are about to follow, and also, yeah, pretty much just for the functions that are about to follow. Next, this space is going to be our canvas. This is where we're going to be working on. So, W to move, right? First, we need a move function. And of course, you know me, the function's got to be created outside, so I'll call it move. And the only parameter, the first and only parameter, is also called move. If this parameter, if move is true, then it means we should be moving forward. If it's false, it means we should stop moving. So start moving and stop moving. And of course, for late in the future when we call this function, I'm gonna print start move. No, I'm just gonna print move actually, and then print stop move. And of course, time for us to actually use this thing, activate the function using context action service. Now, what is context action service? Just to refresh your memory up just a little bit. Why not use user input service instead? Well, user input service allows us to check for when an input is pressed. Context action service is very similar, but it allows us to bind actions. So instead of constantly checking for if that input is pressed, it only checks if that input is pressed under a certain condition. And the condition we're going to be using today for the move is if the skill is activated. So if the skill is activated and we're pressing W, then move or stop moving and so on. So let's go ahead and get our service. Under user input service, we just get context action service. Now we can bind the action. The first parameter is the action name, and I'm just gonna create a new variable right above here for our action name, and this action is gonna be called action move. And of course it's gonna be a string with the same thing. Why do we do this? It's because we're gonna be using this action name at least 3 different times in our code, and just so we don't mess up and accidentally misspell it, breaking some of the code, we create a variable for it. So the first parameter is the action name. The second parameter is the function we're gonna bind. So when our input is pressed, what function is gonna be called? Of course, you know me again with those functions. I shall call it context action functions. I know it's a little bit of a mouthful. This is the only function I'm gonna use for all my context action services, for all my bindings. Continuing on, the next parameter is if we want to create a touch button. Considering this video is for PC only, and I know nothing about mobile scripting, unfortunately I am not that guy, we're gonna press false, which just means no touch button. And finally, Everything else can be every other keybind we want. And for our case, it would be enum.keycode.w. So when W is pressed, it calls this function, of course. Now the function gives us some parameters to work with too. The first parameter is the action name. It's just the action name we fired, of course. The second parameter is the input state. And the final parameter is the input object. There are 3 input states. There's begin, end, and cancel. I may be wrong, but the ones we really care about is begin and end. Because when the input states begin, it means we just clicked the button and we're holding down. When it's end, it means we've let go, which is what we're really going to be using. And the input object is just the input object. It's useful because then we can check what key was pressed, which we're going to be using later on too, so keep that in mind. So now we have all that. We can check if our action is the same as our action move. And if it is, then we check the input state. So if we did begin, that means we're currently holding the W key. If it's end, it means we've let go of the W key. So of course we're gonna fire the function move with true telling us to move forward, and right here move telling us to stop moving. If we go ahead and test that, I activate the skill and there's an error, an unexpected bug. Let's see what happens. Attempt to index nil with bind function. Oh, I see what I did. I called it context action service instead of context action functions. And I also fired the context action service here instead of our actual function. Did anyone catch that? So the function, and then I play. And now we test. When we test, and I press the W key, I move forward. I let go of the W key, it press stop move. I just click it, it press moves and stop move, which is perfect. It's exactly what we're looking for. So now, we know when we're moving and when we're not moving. How do we actually control it? How do we make ourselves move when we're supposed to move and stop moving when we're supposed to stop moving? It's pretty easy actually. All we do is send a message to the server to control our speed. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we fire the messages. Let's go over to our server script and check if we received any such messages. Under loop, I'm gonna check for the message. And if we received any single one of them. And now I'm gonna print move like I did before and print stop and go ahead and test this. When I activate the skill and I move and I stop moving, it works perfectly. What we need to do next is control the speed. So how do we control the speed? Well, we can do some fancy mambo jumbo with variables and figure out some way to do it, but I feel like that would be very complicated and kind of inefficient. So instead, what if we create an int value for the speed and just use that to control the speed? So let's go ahead and do that. Local speed equals, and obviously we're gonna parent it to the broomstick, and let's name the speed. Now when int values are first created, they have a default value of 0, so we don't need to set its value to 0. And of course, to get it or to manipulate it, we first need to actually reference it. So local speed equals broomstick. I'm gonna set this 0 so we stop moving. However, there's some instances where the broomstick is nil, so it gives us an error saying attempt to index nil with find first child, which breaks our whole script. I'll show you. I activate, deactivate, gives us an error, attempt to index nil with find first child. And the reason why it does that is because, again, the broomstick is destroyed, it's gone. So we can check if the broomstick exists. The broomstick does not exist, then there's no point in continuing. Just stop right here, because it means the skill isn't even activated. But then the speed might not exist, so we also have to check. But if not speed, then stop right there. And we notice something. We're repeating ourselves a little too obviously. So we can fix this by just copying and pasting this and going if not broomstick or not speed, then return end. So if the broomsticks exist and the speed doesn't exist, return end. If the broomstick does exist and the speed does exist, then continue going. Now we have our speed. The reason why we didn't create these variables up here is because we didn't really need to destroy the speed. The broomstick is its parent, and if the broomstick gets destroyed, so does all its children. In the loop, instead of multiplying by 0, we could multiply by speed. And when it's time to move, we could simply just set the speed's value to whatever speed we want, to whatever speed we call our regular speed, which in my case is 200. And when it's time to stop, we can set the speed to 0. Let's recap. We created an int value called the speed. We're updating the linear velocity with that speed in every loop. And finally, when we move, we change the speed to 200. And when we stop, we change the speed to 0. Let's go ahead and test that. I activate the skill, and there is an error. Attempt to perform arithmetic on vector 3 an instance. And that's simple. It's because the speed value is an instance and you can't multiply an instance by vector 3. So what we want is the actual value, not the object. So let's test this again. I activate the skill. I'm not moving, which is what is supposed to happen. I press W and I begin to move. Absolutely beautiful. I let go of the W key and I stop. And we're having fun. We're testing this, having the time of our lives. But when we stop, we just kind of stop. Our momentum just ceases to exist. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that's not how physics is supposed to work. And I don't know a lot about physics, considering I'm in the 10th grade going to 11th and I don't touch grass much. But I'm pretty sure that's not how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to slow down because momentum exists. Let's try and recreate that feeling. Remember guys, the feel of each skill, of each movement is very important for the players because it not only shows them you care, but makes the game more enjoyable. So really prioritize making it feel right for the players. So how can we create that feel? Well, instead of instantly stopping, we could slowly stop by tweaking our speed. And of course, I would not be fan mode if I didn't got you guys. We can tween it using the fan mode the tween function. The first parameter is the target, which is our object speed. The second parameter is the goal. It's a lot like real tweening. So value, whatever value we want. So we want it to be 0 in this case. And the third parameter is the tween info, or just the amount of time you want it to tween. In my case, 0.5. And we can repeat the same thing, so it takes us time to actually gain momentum instead of, you know, just spawning with momentum. Before I continue, however, with a flickety flick of my fingers, the beautiful terrain that I lost in the previous video, the gremlin snatched it. My evil F right there, he ate it all. Sad. Thought they were cookies. So now I'm gonna respawn it so it's easier to notice what direction we're flying in and stuff like that. But now let's test. I move forward. Just off the bat, you see that beautiful? Like, I slowly sped up. Honestly, I cannot tell when I speed up, but I felt that. But the most important one is slowing down. So I stop. And would you feel that? It felt like I actually stopped. If I were to just click it, I actually kind of feel it. Okay, that is really, really nice. We have literally created a move. Perfect. There's one more thing I would like to add. Now, before I continue, I just want to remind you guys, when I scripted this, I'm not just scripting everything right now. It didn't take me like however long this video is to script this skill. It took like months of thinking and recalibrating and remaking and just finding 110 errors and then fixing that to make it smoother. So remember that scripting is an uphill battle, but it's a rewarding one. So I am moving forward. I activate the skill and I just stop. Why? It's because when we bind the action, waiting for our player to press the W key, the W key is already pressed. So it doesn't really check it because our player technically doesn't press the W key while the ability is activated. It was already pressed before. But why do we care? Why is this important? Well, when the player is like pressing W and they just activate the skill and it stops them, they have to let go of the W key and press it again, which takes away from the feel. It just feels like it just doesn't add as much weight to the skill. It feels like it was kind of half-baked. But if we were to add it, so like when player is already moving and they press W, it continues with them, it feels more fun to use. So how do we add that? Well, first we check if the key is already being pressed, and if it is, then we just activate our move. And because we're going to be checking if keys are pressed a lot, like a total of maybe 3-4 times during this whole video, I'm going to create a function for it called check key pressed. And of course, always create the functions outside, you know me. And let's put it right here at the very top. So check key pressed. The first parameter is the key, and the idea is if this key is being pressed, then activate this function. So how do we get all the keys being pressed? There's a user input service function called getKeyPressed, and it just returns a table of all the keys currently being pressed. So then I can loop through said table and then check if that key is equal to our key. And I do enum the key code the key because I want to send a string here instead of an enum key code, because I feel like that makes it slightly more convenient. And if they are, and if the key is being pressed, then we call the function. Simple enough. So check key pressed. The key is W. We could go create a new function, then go move true, or we could make it slightly more optimized. We can fire true, just assuming, because every time we check the key pressed, we essentially are checking, and if it's true, then we want to fire the true ability, right? So we can now just put move there. Now if we're pressing W before we activate the skill, it would fire us to move, saying, hey, we're pressing W already, let's move. Let's go ahead and test this. I'm pressing W and I activate the skill, and we don't move. Why is this? Well, I actually have no clue. Let's go test. So check key pressed equals function the key in pairs key press do if key equals enum the key code key, then function, then I check for the key press W, so it should technically work. I'm gonna try and print something here to see if the code ever gets to that position, and it seems, do I even call the function? That's my question. So check, yes, I do indeed call the function, and it seems it never gets here, so they're not the same key. And let's see if it ever actually calls the function. Yes, it does call the function. And this is how I error code. Now I want to see what keys it found. Oh, I see. I'm pretty sure I made this mistake 4 times in a row as I was practicing for this video. So, as you all see, it fires an input object. We need to now check that input object's key code. An input object is just an object of input. So if the input object's key code, so I should rename this then, input object. equals to equals enum the key code bracket key, then we fire the function. Oh, we should move. And ladies and gentlemen, that is indeed how I error check. But that was a lot smoother because I had practiced it like a couple thousand times. So let's activate the skill. And it works. If I'm moving and I deactivate skill, it works. And now it's not stopping me in error. Perfect. It's time to move on to sprinting. And what, I kid you not guys, sprinting and